Hi everyone and welcome to Riskologists. This podcast is brought to you by Optimise and hosted by me, Pat Bradshaw.
And me, Nicola Boyle. Optimise are thrilled to host this podcast series where we'll be speaking with some of risk management's most respected and esteemed thought leaders from across the UK and beyond.
Throughout Season 3, we'll be exploring our guest journey within risk management, as well as exploring key conversations and topics around the overarching theme of the season being the future of risk management.
Our goal is to create a platform in which ideas and thoughts can be shared in order to inspire and educate our audience, and to ultimately give back to the risk management community across the world.
So without further ado, let's get into it. Hi everyone and welcome to this episode of Riskologists. I'm one half of your host, Pat Bradshaw.
And I'm the other half, Nicola Boyle.
Happy days. Great to be back. This is actually the first episode we've recorded of all of them. I'm not sure if this is going to be the first one that we release. Maybe not. I'll see how well it goes. But yeah, no, it's absolutely a pleasure to be back. As some of you will know, I took a bit of a hiatus away for a couple of years to actually go and do some risk management, which was fun. So no longer a podcast host, but absolutely buzzing to be back in the hot seat and delighted to be joined by my friend, my colleague, and Risk Newcomer of the Year 2023, Nicola Boyle. Nick, how you feeling?
Yeah, looking forward to it. Excited for this new season. It's something I've not done before, so thought I'd take on this opportunity and see how it goes.
Happy days. Sounds great. Well, without further ado, I guess we should introduce our first guest of season 3 is a colleague, a really close friend of both of us, and an optimised partner and pillar, and that's Matthew Livingstone. Matt, great to have you on, mate.
Thanks very much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this. It's crazy that it's taken us sort of 3 seasons to get to the point where I've kind of come on, but I've always been in the background working away and helping and Pat and Andy in season 2 as well. It's a real privilege to be in front of the mic and in front of the cameras.
Happy days. Yeah, no, it is a bit mad, isn't it? Because, like I say, we had Sutty on, Paul Sutcliffe to everybody else, so we affectionately call him Sutty at Optimise, on in season 1. We've not had Paul Disley on yet, or Diz. But Matt is probably the person who spearheaded the podcast. He's always been the person I've lent on. So yeah, it feels only right that we get him on the podcast. So yeah, just jumping straight into it then. I'm sure everyone will be familiar with the way that we tend to kick things off on Riskologists as a bit of a journey to date. I guess how you got into risk management, your journey up to this very point, obviously up to Optimise. You can be as in detail or as vague as you like, but yeah, fire away.
Thanks, Pat. It's really interesting, isn't it, when you look back through the previous season's guests, and I think it's been a topic and a theme throughout, really, is that everyone gets into risk management in different ways. The overriding reason most people stick with it is because of the fact that they're passionate about it and they can see the value it gives. And I was no different, really. I'm a passionate aviation enthusiast. I always have been. Ever since I watched Top Gun when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a pilot. And I started going down the route of becoming a pilot and actually got fairly far down that route before a few things happened personally that meant that I couldn't really do it anymore. And the next best thing was to kind of work in the aerospace industry. So I applied for BAE Systems project management graduate scheme, and I was thankfully very successful in getting my application approved. And I started at Woodford, which is no longer open. It used to be an airport in the south of Manchester in the UK, building the replacement maritime patrol aircraft, which was called Nimrod MRA4. And I literally the first day on that project, first day in the job after I'd gone through the induction and the health and safety stuff, as you do, someone came up to me and said, right, this is going to be your project. There's this thing called ISO 31000. We don't know about it, but we need to do it. We've been told by people above that we've got to do this thing. It's basically the pillar of risk management. Read it and do risk management to us. And obviously as a 21-year-old kind of fresh out of uni, super excited to just be in my first proper career job. I jumped in with both feet. I put loads of effort and energy into it and tried really hard to deliver it in a way that was super value added. And I guess partially because of the fact that I was new to the team and the team were quite kind with me. And also because of my energy and enthusiasm, I really, really, really enjoyed it. It was really successful. And I moved around the business and did lots of other little roles in project controls work and project management work. But I just always thought like, I really enjoyed risk management. I just couldn't wait to get back to doing a bit more risk management. And then my career kind of moved from there. So I went from Woodford, did 6 years at Woodford and in various roles, but eventually got back into the project controls and risk management stuff once I'd been around the rest of the business. When the project was cancelled in 2011, I took a redundancy package. I could have got some work up in Wharton and some of the other sites, but I wanted to go and see the world, so I went and travelled for a little bit, which was really great and eye-opening and helped me to kind of reform my perspective of what I wanted from my life, which was really good to do. And when I came back, I was approached back by BAE Systems to come and do some work for them at Samlesbury, which is another one of their sites for military aircraft. And they said, we can only get you back if you're willing to be a contractor. So I was like, okay, I've never done this contracting thing before, but I'll give it a go. And I went back as a contractor and set up my own company and really enjoyed it and just really liked being in charge of my own destiny and my own boss. I've always had quite an entrepreneurial spirit, so it was quite kind of complementary to what I'd done in the past, and I always had little things in the background. If I wasn't making computers for people and selling them to my family and friends, I was building websites for colleagues and friends and stuff like that. And so it's always been something I've done, and I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit. So it felt quite natural to kind of start working for myself. So I worked at Samlesbury for a few years as a contractor, doing risk management and also doing a bit of planning for them too. And then I moved into a project management role. And then I got headhunted by a company that was in the supply chain of down in Aldermaston, basically, for the nuclear deterrent. That went really well, really enjoyed that role. And then I eventually got into nuclear decommissioning and again started as a contractor in risk management and nuclear decommissioning. That's where I met some of the partners from Optimise, and the rest is history, really. We were all quite passionate people about risk. We'd all seen it done really well in some places, not so well in others, and we all had a real desire to get better value out of it and to change things in the industry for the better. And that's why we set up the company, and here I am today, having worked in loads of different industries for Optimise, in aerospace, in aviation, in oil and gas, on roads. I think the only thing I've not done actually in the UK at the moment is rail, but pretty much all other industries I've covered. So it's been a real privilege to be part of all the projects that I've been able to work on. I've got a really good, diverse portfolio of experience, and also I've got a really good network of people that I've met, and it's really nice to kind of have a good stable base and be happy in your job, and that's where I'm at the moment. So yeah, that's me.
Cool. Cheers. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for sharing that. And I think me and Pat can really feel the passion that you have for risk management as part of the team here at Optimise. So we can really feel that as a whole group here as well. So just sort of touching on the topic then that we're here to discuss today, can you tell us a bit about why you've chose that topic and why you think it's important?
Yeah, sure. So the topic I've chosen today is practical applications of artificial intelligence within risk management. I'll start off with the big caveat that I am not an artificial intelligence absolute hero. I'm not one of these people who is technically minded in terms of artificial intelligence. There are other people that can do that. The reason that I'm passionate about it is I've always been interested in computers. From very early days, I've always, I've built computers when I was in my sort of teens, and worked on software projects, developed websites. I did my degree was in computing, so I've always had a passion for leveraging technology to be more effective and more efficient in the roles that you do. And AI is clearly a subject that everyone's very talkative about at the moment. I think there's a huge amount of opportunity and value in AI, as long as we understand how to do it effectively and where it can really add value, and maybe where it's not quite there yet, shall we say. So today's podcast episode was really about trying to share my experiences with using AI as probably someone who was a bit more of an early adopter into the technology and its use in risk management, and try and give the listeners of the podcast some hints and tips on where I think it may be going. It's my opinion at the end of the day. No one's got 100% crystal ball, but part of our job is to forecast. So I would hope that we're pretty good at it. And as a consequence, hopefully I've got a little bit of insight that I can offer to people, just so that they can, figure out what actions that they can take to leverage the technology, to be ahead of the curve, to give themselves time back, to add more value to their clients. That's what it can do for them. So that's the hope from today's podcast episode.
Happy days, yeah, no, and it's I think you're the perfect person to do that, because I'll be honest, like when I joined Optimise, I think it was no secret that I was a bit of probably the only 26-year-old technophobe in the country at the time, and Matt has a really, really good proclivity, a great proclivity for explaining really complex things, particularly like technological things, and explaining those in a way that people can understand, and Nick and I have definitely been sort of beneficiaries of that over the years. So sounds really, really exciting. Yeah, I'll pass over to Nick.
Cheers, thanks, Pat. So yeah, as you'd kind of spoken about, I think everyone's sort of talking about AI at the moment. It does seem to be the sort of trend at the moment, so everyone's getting involved in. So, especially over the last couple of years anyway, but could you give us a bit of a timeline on your experience with AI, and just sort of when the heavy industry started to use it?
Sure, yeah. So I won't go all the way back, but what I will say is, obviously doing my degree in computing, we learned a lot about the advancement of AI over time, and it really all predominantly started with Alan Turing putting his test down to try and set a benchmark, I guess, of how we would be able to determine if a machine was sentient, if it was human-like, and if it could perform the same functions that we do. And that was in 1950. And then from that, as soon as the gauntlet was put down, that became sort of a race to try and build something that was capable of passing that test. As humans, we love a challenge, don't we? So I think as soon as that was put down, it was like, right, let's try and work to develop that challenge, to be able to pass the test. AI developed in the sort of 70s and 80s with as computer programming power advanced. The use of AI became more prevalent. There was lots of technologies that kind of worked in isolation. So certainly during my lifetime, I've seen things like the use of chatbots, which I find incredibly annoying because they don't always give me.
Sam.
There we go. So they don't always give you quite the answer you're looking for, but it's not the technology's fault. It's just limitations of the information it's provided. Voice recognition has become more of a common thing in today's world, and obviously that's an aspect of AI. OCR and text recognition seems really basic, but again, that's another form of a computer being able to recognize and understand what's written in Word and translate that into a way where it can maybe make decisions off the back of it. So these were all technologies which were developing at pace, but for very specific reasons. For OCR and text translation, it was the technology more developed because people wanted to take a physical document that they had and convert it into an editable document on a computer. It wasn't because they were trying to build something that would then create AI, but it became a stepping stone for computers to go, I can look at an image, I convert it into text, I've got access to a dictionary, I know what all of these words mean, and therefore I can translate what's on the page, and that can help me understand it. And so, as I said, these technologies kind of developed in silos, and really in the last 2 to 3 years is when things have really started advancing, because the quality of the different disparate technologies has improved to a level where it's in some cases beating humans. In other cases, it's operating at very high levels where it's close to beating humans, and that's where the convergence of all of these technologies is getting to a point where AI is becoming quite a powerful tool. So people will often see it today, typically a lot of organizations where they're able to, will use things like Microsoft Copilot, which just helps them to administer meetings. So they'll start a meeting, they'll start transcribing the meeting, and they can just ask AI questions during the meeting. The Copilot AI plug-in with Microsoft Teams, and it will just give them quick answers. It will summarize information. You can ask it to, can you give me the actions out of this meeting and the due dates and who the responsible people are? And that's all come from, voice recognition, from listening to what people are saying, conversion into text, which is technology based off, the stuff that came from OCR and some of the earlier technologies, linking to the internet to be able to understand what's happening, and then obviously converted into something which we can output and use effectively. So even as that's a basic use of AI that people are using today, but it's come from this, progressive build of individual disparate technologies. And as I said, the last couple of years, certainly with ChatGPT entering the market, with large language models, deep learning. You look at companies like Boston Dynamics in the States that are trying to advance it quite rapidly as well at the moment. And OpenAI, which are the owners of ChatGPT, are obviously working really hard on not just the large language model work with ChatGPT, but also DALL-E for image creation and some of the creative elements of it as well. So it's a really, really exciting time, but for a lot of people, it's also quite scary. So the hope today, if anything I can get out of this today, is to try and translate to people that are in risk that you don't need to be afraid. It's just a case of this is another tool in your toolbox, and the idea is that we learn the skills to be able to use it effectively, and it will make our lives easier.
Happy days. So coming from someone who's come from quite a, as you've already mentioned in your journey today, quite a sort of a technological background, I guess I would say that. Are you particularly when you've demonstrated it to me, for example, and maybe some other people when they'll see the power of it? I know you've given me some examples where that's happened, where people have been absolutely blown away by it. Are you surprised it's taken as long as it has to get to the position it is, although it's on an upward trend? Or are you, from going back from when you were sort of in your early career, did you anticipate it would be as powerful this in your lifetime?
I'm gonna use the example that we were always a bit worried about using before, but I remember being 11 years old and watching Terminator 2 for the first time. And I'm sure most listeners will have probably heard of Terminator 2, or at least know what it is, but I am getting quite old. So just for the avoidance of doubt, that was an Arnold Schwarzenegger film in the 90s, which basically was AI takes over the world in the future and they send robots back in time. Yeah, and then the robots back in time try to kill prominent members of the rebellion against the AI. And I thought to myself, that film was set in a time when I was like, this is never going to happen. The concept of what we call general superintelligence, which is a sentient being that could pass the Turing test and do everything better than humans. I didn't think that was possible in my lifetime, really.
Yeah.
Even as I was working in technology and doing my degree and doing lots of research into technologies such as AI, it just felt too distant.
Science fiction, isn't it?
That's
what they say. Science fiction. So
exactly that.
It couldn't happen.
But the advancements today, the thing that I don't worry about it at all, because I think the great thing that we've got that's very different to that science fiction position is the governance that's around development of AI. There's lots of different international standards that have been made, although we don't have a combined international standard, but we've got lots of standard. The US and Canada have got a standard. We've got the Bletchley-Park Declaration in the UK, which is our standard on how we would develop AI. Other nations are being lobbied and pressured quite hard to develop their own standards and expectations. EMAA have got their own standard on AI development. So the governance around it gives me confidence and hope that AI is being controlled. The way it's being developed is somewhat regulated, and as a consequence, hopefully we can foster a tool in AI and build a relationship with AI in the future, which doesn't end up being some science fiction movie. But I guess to answer your question directly, I didn't think it would advance as fast as it did, but I'm not surprised it has, because if you look at other technological advancement within computing, for example, it's never a straight line. It's always exponential. The power of computing has evolved immensely quickly. If I think back to when I was 8 or 9 years old playing Theme Hospital on a Pentium 133 computer, and I look at the computers that, even the computer that I have at home now, I'm very lucky to have a really powerful computer at home, but that computer's thousands of times more powerful than something from 30 years ago. The percentage difference is incredible. So I'm not surprised that we are where we are. As I said, my hope is that governance just keeps us at a level and pace which is sustainable and doesn't generate and doesn't introduce more risks into the world in terms of, the advancements of AI and the negative connotations that people have with it that come from science fiction movies and other bits and pieces like that.
So you don't see us being skivvies for Skynet then?
I hope not. Not anytime soon. If the governments do things correctly, I think we'll be in a really good spot.
Good stuff. Yeah, so it's funny, isn't it? Like, because I'm 30 now, and I sort of joke with my mates sometimes that I feel like we were sort of just about the last generation to go and knock on your mates' doors and ask if they're playing out and stuff. And I didn't have a phone. I was probably a bit of an anomaly, to be fair, but I didn't have a phone until I was about 17, I don't think. But when you think about, I'm only 30, well, only 30, and how quickly it's developed in the past 20 years versus the previous 100 years or whatever is scary, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And it's the last 2 years as well.
Yeah,
it's gone exponential again in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So you just don't know, is that an upward spike that's going to continue to trend at that sort of level of progression, or is that something which maybe some of the governance and assurance arrangements that have been put in place will just temper a little bit? So
yeah,
we don't really know at the moment, but certainly the technology as it stands, there are lots of opportunities and benefits when it comes to application and risk management.
Okay, good stuff. So I guess just moving on to a point you made earlier then in regards to a little bit of reluctance from people. Well, I'm not sure if reluctance is the right word, but I'll stick with reluctance for want of a better word. Where do you feel reluctance comes from, or aversion to AI actually comes from? Although it was obviously tongue-in-cheek what we were discussing in regards to Skynet and all that sort of stuff. Do you think it's as a result of that people are worried that this science fiction sort of thing is going to happen? Do you think it's more of a trust issue, I guess, whilst we sort of fine-tune how the AI works and interprets information and things like that? Where do you think the reluctance comes from people, generally speaking?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, for me, my experience of the world is it's never one thing, right? It's always going to be a combination of lots of different things. Do science fiction movies have a blame part? Yes, absolutely. I think, we go to the extreme of using something like, the apocalypse, Matrix movies and things like that, and they're a little bit more far-fetched, but some of the more subtle films that have come out in recent years that sort of show AI integrated in society, there's a level of realism to them where you sort of go, okay, this could be quite scary actually, because we could legitimately end up with robotic AI sentient beings walking around amongst us, taking people's jobs and administrative stuff and things like that. Personally, I think that's part of it. I think part of it is a nervousness around technology, because it's something new and people haven't had 10 or 15 years to adopt to it. It's kind of been a trend that's just emerged very quickly over time. Most people, especially the older that we get, unfortunately, tend to struggle to embrace change as quickly. So there will always be a level of hostility to something new before people research it, understand it a bit more. Once they do that, they tend to get a little bit more comfortable with it. I think we're at a period now where people have played on the periphery of AI, but they've not really got the head into understanding how useful it can or cannot be, and therefore it's still a threat. Until someone can demonstrate to them, or until they've done enough research to make themselves really comfortable that, no, this isn't a threat, it is something that I can use and leverage, the natural position will be, I'm a bit nervous about this. It might end up taking some of my role, it might end up limiting what I can do. For some professions, people are really worried because it can do some good creative stuff. But again, if you've played around with it creatively, if I'll use DALL-E as an example, you need to be very, very skillful at prompt engineering to be able to get anything half decent out of DALL-E. So there's a whole new sector being created, a whole new skill set being created there just in prompt engineering. And I know we'll get to that in a little bit later in the podcast, but it's just, I suppose the point I'm trying to make is people are fearful of things they don't understand. So we're on a journey to all understand. Hopefully this podcast is part of that journey for the listeners. Understand it a little bit more, and hopefully then the fear will subside and people start embracing it a bit more.
Yep, exactly. I was just going to touch on that point as well, that it's that educational piece, that reluctant, if you're not going to research it and understand it, you're just not going to embrace it. Exactly. So
exactly.
It is really that educational piece, and once people kind of break that barrier and start learning how to use it, it's going to be a real opportunity.
Yeah.
So just touching on that point of people that are using it, but not just in risk management, how are they applying AI in sort of the project, portfolio and program space?
Yeah, sure. So I think at the moment there's a fair bit of testing going on. I've not personally seen a massive amount of application beyond it helping people to do things like basic report writing, helping people to do things like I was saying before, administrative type work. So if you need to get some notes developed, it can help you summarize things very quickly. It can help you draft documents. It's helpful, certainly small companies. It's very helpful for them to develop things like their management system documentation. So a lot of what goes into a management system is often based on legislation as a minimum. It takes a lot of time for people to develop those things and make them bespoke, and AI is really good at just being able to produce something, trolling the internet fairly quickly. Obviously everything's got to be checked, and it's never going to be perfect, but even if it does half the job for you, that's half of your time saved, where you can just spend a bit of time polishing and refining things to get it up to 100% complete. That's where it tends to be being used at the moment. Development of presentation packs I've seen. Some companies are starting to use it to import their data into an AI model and then use something like a ChatGPT front end to be able to challenge and ask questions. Companies such as Nplan, they're using it a little bit more at the moment on the schedule side of things, as you guys have seen from when we had the team from Mplan come up and do a bit of training for us in Optimise, but they are using it to try and help improve and develop schedules. Part of the limitations of it at the moment in project management is due to data regulation and data ownership. So lots of the bigger organisations that certainly from a project perspective in the UK, lots of the bigger projects in the UK tend to be government funded. They're really large sort of mega project type work. That tends to be government funded. There's an element of data trust that comes with that. The government are very apprehensive to share data with third parties. Obviously for political reasons, if the data maybe isn't painting the best picture in terms of project delivery, that doesn't want to be shared because it might get to the press, etc., etc. So there's things that limit our ability to use AI. The government have their own think tank and their own panel that are trying to actively develop and enhance and leverage AI, but it'll be done possibly at a slower pace than a commercially run organisation like Nplan or Nodes and Links, or insert any other technology company that's developing this AI work at the moment. They want it to happen a lot quicker. They want access to the data faster, because they've got the technology to be able to leverage it and get more benefit, but there is a little bit of reluctance at the moment to be able to do that. So that's where we potentially will end up going. That's going back to my earlier comments when I was answering the question around, it's being used to test purposes at the moment. It's because people are having to re-aggregate the data and think about how they're going to feed that data into an AI model, and train the model in the data. Because only once you've given the model the data and you've been able to train it so that it understands the data, can you then start asking it questions and interrogating it, and that's when it starts adding the value. So I think a lot of organisations at the moment are looking internally and saying, what's our corporate history look like? What's our corporate knowledge base look like? How can we improve it? Or how can we rebuild it in a lot of cases? Because quite a few companies, I think, they'll be, if they were honest with themselves, haven't done a great job at recording historical data on project delivery. So there's a fair bit of work just around, we want to leverage AI. We recognise that the technology is really powerful. It can save us a lot of money. It's going to come anyway, whether we like it or not. So we need to get ourselves into a position to be ready for it. And some of the things that they're working on are, certainly the data sources. That tends to be where a lot of it's happening at the moment, from my experience. Yeah. Obviously, there'll be pockets of organisations and projects around the world that will be leveraging it significantly more than that. There'll be some that won't be leveraging it at all, besides occasional individual people on the team just using ChatGPT for a little bit of efficiency gains in a certain task they're doing. So it's a broad spectrum. But what I will say is, if you look at the trends, and certainly, Microsoft quite often release information on uptake and use of Copilot. OpenAI have done the same in the past. The trend is very much more and more people are starting to use AI day to day in their jobs.
Yeah. So in terms of, I guess, more subtle uses of things like AI in 21st century tools, is there anything that people might be using that they're unaware is actually a 21st century tool? Like, for example, when we went through some of the internal training at Optimise around 21st century tools, we used like sat-navs as an example, and you might not necessarily associate that with artificial intelligence. Is there anything that people may or may not be using as part of their roles at the moment which is classed as AI but isn't necessarily one of those AI models, or a ChatGPT or GPT or whatever?
It's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. It's in the background of so much stuff that we do every day. It depends on what your definition of AI is.
Yeah.
It depends on lots of things, but the technology that AI is based on is used globally, and you are constantly involved in it. Anything from shopping on Amazon, they are recording your information. The AI in the background is trying to determine the type of user you are, that it's looking at your previous history, it's looking at your characteristics, it's looking at hundreds of data sources from across the web to develop a picture of who you are as a person, and then it's subtly placing adverts in front of you that it knows are going to have a high chance of a follow-up purchase coming out the back of that advert. Google Maps is constantly refining and looking at data sources from thousands of vehicles and people and phones and devices from all over the world, and its AI algorithm is building a picture of what traffic looks like on a motorway, and then it's feeding that back to other devices, and it's recognizing and saying to them, you might want to take an alternative route. And people who have Alexa from Amazon in their homes, you're talking to a very simplistic AI model there, and that's it will, Alexa, go and search the internet for X, Y, and Z, and it will go and find it for you. So it's everywhere. Yeah, CCTV information will leverage, public CCTV usage will leverage some form of AI in the technology to be able to just, right, this movement happening over here, it'll go and track it.
Yeah.
Any vehicles with cameras in them that may or may not be mapping the road network. I've got a Tesla, and that is very advanced at it will just constantly send information back to Tesla headquarters about road conditions, and it will read signs, it will read speed limits, it will pick up hazards and things in the background. There's like a don't know if it's an infrared sensor, or I think it is an infrared sensor at the front, and it'll pick up pedestrians walking on the pavement next to me, and it'll pick up the vehicle in front of me and the vehicles at the side and the vehicle behind. And so, yeah, it's prevalent already. It's already with us. It's just been done subconsciously to us for a long period of time. The last 2 years is really where it's starting to move more into consciousness with people. And then that's when people are going, okay, well, we're using it for all these other bits and pieces. It's become more powerful than that now. What else can we use it to leverage and improve our roles?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was an intentional question. I guess I was trying to evoke a bit of thought around maybe those who are listening who have had a little bit of reluctance to it in the past. And I think I saw a stat that Microsoft shared, it was something like 75% of people are already using AI in their role, whether, like you say, it's that consciousness, whether or not you're aware of it or not. I think
it's quite crazy as well, because the 75% of people, I think somewhere in the region of 50% of that 75% have only been using AI in the last 6 months.
It's crazy, isn't it?
So that just shows the pace and the pace of change that's happening. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. No, it makes perfect sense. I think another shout out to an old school film, Minority Report, was something we touched on as well, wasn't it? Around that ad piece, if anybody's seen that. I've actually never seen it, to be fair, but we were talking about it when we were learning about the AI tools, and I feel like that science fiction stuff, although I guess that's good, isn't it?
It hasn't manifested, that was science fiction,
isn't it?
Which was holograms with adverts where someone was walking through a shopping centre and it would read your retina and understand that. Then from that single ID source, it would understand who you were, and because it had all the data points, it would start hologramming images of adverts in front of you. But if you think about where we are today, we don't have a hologram, but if you look around when you're walking around the city centre, 90% of the people are looking straight down at a device in their hand. Yeah. And that device might be feeding them adverts. So it's not that far removed from the science fiction now, and that was a film that's maybe 15, 20 years old. I don't know how old Minority Report is now, but you see what I mean? It's the technology has arrived. It's just come in a different physical format to what the film suggested it was going to be.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. Cheers, Matt. So in terms of future advancements in AI then, again, I know you sort of caveated at the start, it's uncertain, we don't know exactly what direction it's going. Which future advancements do you see having the biggest impact on risk management?
I think the biggest advancements that we'll get from AI in risk management will be the analysis side of risk management will become a lot more machine orientated in terms of the grunt work. Excuse me. And I don't use that as a derogatory term. We do a lot of work in risk modelling, risk analysis, which is, it's a big part of the role that we do. We don't get to spend as much time as I personally would like to spend on analysing the outputs, looking at scenarios, trying to understand what does plan B look like, what does plan C look like, what does plan D look like, what happens if this manifests differently, if this risk was scored incorrectly, what would it do to the overall job? And that's the bit where AI will really help us from my perspective. So yes, I'm not going to be necessarily doing the risk analysis part of it anymore. I would hope that I'm still able to go back in and look at how AI's interpreted the data and make adjustments and recommendations, because again, the AI model will always need to learn. The amount of information that that we feed to it will only improve the outputs. So I think there's always going to be an element of there needs to be a human checking what's going on. The analogy that I always use is sat nav, actually. So I remember back in the sort of early 2000s when I would get a TomTom device that would be like suckered to my windscreen, and I would put in my destination and it would take me somewhere, and I ended up in the middle of a farmer's field because it just it wasn't quite there, So the level of trust that you had in that device only went so far. The second that I started going down a weird looking driveway, I'd be like, this is wrong. I'm not even going to trust it anymore. I'm going to turn around and come back. Versus today, if I'm going anywhere that I've never been before, I will go on Google Maps. I will type it in, and I will verbatim follow what it tells me to do because the trust is there. Now I know that it's not going to take me down a little track somewhere that I can't navigate, or a road that's been potholed to, to death. So that's the difference for me, is that the trust at the moment, we're in tom phase with AI.
Yeah.
It hallucinates. It does things that's a bit weird and unpredictable. As a consequence, people are like, well, it's a load of rubbish. It's not a load of rubbish. It just hasn't evolved enough to get to a stage where we've built that trust with it. That trust still come over time, just like it does with any technology. And like I said, if we can get the data fed into it in a way that's sensible, if the models are trained correctly on the data, a lot of the analysis work in risk management will then be offered off to an AI. We'll do the checking in the background. The important bit will then be our ability to interrogate what the model suggests and to pose scenarios and ask it questions and try and remove and refine, as get rid of as much error and incorrect information as possible, refine the outputs, and then translate it to decision makers. Because at the end of the day, a decision maker is going to really struggle to be able to interpret the results of a model. Eventually, we might get to a stage where the AI is better at then doing the translation piece. But again, that feels a long, long way away from my perspective. I still think you need that human interface, the emotional discussion around things, the interpretation of the information. I still feel that's going to be very much human orientated for the not too distant future, at least. Other areas where, from a risk management perspective, it might make an impact, things like report writing and generation. It'll you can potentially set things up where you automate things. Even now, there are some projects where I'm able to, where I use tools like Power Automate, and that will just automatically pull out a copy of a risk register, put it into a certain format for me on a date every month. I don't need to worry about doing that. It just arrives in my inbox on an email, and I just then look at it, check it all, obviously make sure it's correct, make any minor adjustments I need to make to it, and then I'll forward it off to the relevant people. So even just simple things like that, that's a step in the right direction. That saves me a huge amount of time, because if I'd have done that job manually, I might have had to, filter a risk register X number of times, do 7 or 8 different iterations of it, send them out to different people. I can automate all of that now. So a lot of that, I think, will happen as well with AI. Again, moving further into the future, and again, it's a big requirement on the people with the data to be able to get it into a good format, to get it to be representative, to get it to be accurate. You have to remember that when we use the term we're training an AI model, we're teaching it how we perceive things. Yeah. But we're humans, right? So we don't perceive things correctly all the time. So that's part of the struggle with AI models, is when you train an AI model, you also train it on your own biases. So having to kind of refine the data and remove those biases is going to be really important too. And that's going to lead to, hopefully, a situation where we can trust the data, we can trust the outputs, and that just gives us time back. So as a risk professional, I'm then thinking, right, brilliant, I've got a load more time to do more of the interrogation work. I don't have to do as much report writing as I do at the moment. That's time that I can give back to the client in terms of better discussions around the data, helping them make more informed risk decisions. For me, that's just an absolute win.
Yeah, amazing. It sounds like all these future advancements are going to be really efficient, and it all sounds really positive from your aspects. And I guess it sort of puts sort of more trust for myself, especially I would say maybe for Pat as well, that it's actually a lot more exciting than it first seems. So just sort of like flipping it on the other side then, sort of looking at the sort of negatives or limitations. I know you've touched on one of them being data regs and data ownership, but is there any sort of burning limitations or negatives that you can think of AI that might influence on our profession?
Yeah, so I think so certainly at the moment we don't have a better interface with a computer other than with something like a large language model. So the chat GPT type, we type a question into a box and then the AI comes up with an answer. I think because of that, the ability to get the data out of the data set, out of the model, is somewhat limited. So the term that's often used, and I've mentioned it before, is prompt engineering. And prompt engineering is about thinking about, you're asking a question to a very basic entity, almost like a child. That's the way that I tend to approach prompt engineering. If you ask a child to do a particular task, unless you give them a set of exact and very specific instructions, the output's going to be wrong.
Yeah.
And that's the way that I always look at prompt engineering, is you have to be very specific, way more specific than you probably think you need to be, actually, to get the result you're looking for. The other difference with how we use prompt engineering versus how we've integrated with data in the past via things like, the Google search engine. Lots of people will type their questions into Google and then they'll have to feed through articles. Obviously, as we progress, that might disappear. It might just be, we have a discussion with, I use the term or I use the example of like Holly from Red Dwarf, for example, where it's a floating head on a screen and you have a conversation and you interrogate that way. But as I said before, if the data is not right, if the basis of the data is not right, then that's a limitation. At the moment, we don't have Holly. We have to rely on prompt engineering. If you're not a good prompt engineer, you're not going to get the right answer. But the problem is, you might not know that you've got the wrong answer unless you're informed. So that's the big challenge. Certainly we're facing Optimise is we're trying to educate our team around AI, but we're also trying to educate all of the team with recognizing the weaknesses and recognizing that actually at the level that you're at the moment, with the knowledge and experience that you have, you could use it for some of these things, but actually it'd probably be more dangerous for you to use it to other things, because you can't validate whether or not it's telling you the truth or not. And then you might share that information with clients or third parties, and it's the wrong information, which then generates reputational damage for the business, personal brand damage for the individual. So it's just about that position of, if you know what the right answer is, you can use it, because you can check it. If you don't know what the right answer is, that becomes a big area of concern. I guess other negatives around it are the things like the hallucinations. So sometimes it'll go through its data store. You've given it a perfectly good prompt. It will go into its data store and it will pick a piece of information which is related to maybe the same word but a different context of that word. So as a consequence, you'd get an answer which is totally, what's this? Where this makes no sense at all. In the English language especially, we tend to use the same word spelled the same way, pronounced the same way for multiple different things. And sometimes, the AI can't really differentiate between those differences, and then that's when you get hallucinations. So again, I think for me the big challenge with it at the moment is the ability to trust what it says, and also the ability for us to be good prompt engineers will offer value. But if we're not good prompt engineers and we can't train the models effectively, we could end up in lots of error traps.
Yeah. I sound like an absolute film merchant now. I'm gonna mention another film. When you were teaching me about prompt engineering stuff, there's a film called, I think it's called Phenomenon, with John Travolta. I don't know if you've seen it before, when he becomes an absolute genius. And basically they're testing how much of a genius he is, and they ask him, if I was born in this year, how old would I be? And then he keeps going back and saying, what month, what day, what time, male or female, whereabouts in the world. And he pulls it all the way to the back and they say, why do you keep asking this as well? Because specifics are important, because if I was born at this time, this date, here, but if I was born in New York, I'd be 3 hours older than I was in LA. That's the, if anyone's listening, if anyone's heard that or seen that film, then that's the first thing that came to my mind when we were talking about prompt engineering. But I thought that was quite a good example, because the specifics are important, and for someone who's had a little bit of exposure using some of those things and understanding how important it is, Like it is literally a technology, and I think the point you've made is it's always going to need that human element to interpret it.
Definitely, yeah. And even with, with the prompt engineering as well, it can be quite frustrating, right? So especially when you first start learning it, because whereas your previous interactions maybe with Google might be ask Google a question and then you have to maybe flick through 5 or 6 web pages until you find the correct answer. With prompt engineering, it gives you an answer. So it only gives you one thing. It doesn't give you a list of things. It gives you one thing. And you start reading that one thing and go, no, you're wrong. I can tell already you're wrong. So stop. Right. And then you have to go and ask it the question again in a different way. And you have to ask the question again in a different way, in a different way, in a different way. So it becomes, the search becomes a conversation rather than data transition. It's not a transactional thing. I mean, it is, but it's done over iteration, if you get me. Whereas if you do it via a search engine, you've got a little bit more work to do because you have to search through 5 or 6 pages. But it's giving you relevant information. It's just giving you options that you can go and pick from. With AI, you have to converse with it until you get the correct option.
Like a funnel, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I was saying prompt engineering is going to be a really powerful tool for people at the moment. But even moving forwards, the more specific that we can get in our communication, the better we'll be able to interact with AI. In the future, as AI starts to develop more of a general consciousness, you might not need to prompt engineer as effectively because you might be talking to an adult with lots of knowledge and experience, and therefore they can understand the intricacies of what you're asking them and they can give you the right answer quicker. But at the moment, we're not really at that point, so we do have to be patient with it a little bit and sort of, right, okay, it's still not quite understood what I'm trying to ask. Let's ask it a different way, or let's be more specific about the information that I'm asking it. So it'll be, for any of you who've not really used large language models and prompt engineering, stick with it is what I would say. It can be quite frustrating at first. If you've trained people, it actually really helps from my experience, because I teach a lot of people as part of my role in the business. I have to be quite specific with people because they're coming from a position of they want to gain the knowledge that I've got. And therefore they need to listen, but they also ask questions, and I'll think, yeah, it's a valid question actually, because I've not been specific enough about what I've given them there. So that means that I'll go and tweak the pack, be more specific next time to try and mitigate that question being raised again. And it's the same with your interaction with a large language model. It's that you're literally just having to learn. You have to look at it and go, yeah, that's my fault. I've not asked the right question, or I've not asked it in the right way. Take a breath, go and get a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or a water, beverage of choice, relax, and then have a go again. And if you keep practicing it, it'll become more and become slicker and slicker and slicker, and it will become easier, and you'll get to your answers faster. And that will be an advantage.
Yeah, definitely. This probably actually tees up quite nicely to this next question. We probably touched on a few of the points already throughout this episode, but just what of advice could you give to risk professionals like myself and Pat and others who are looking to integrate AI into their practices? And then also, secondly, looking at organisations who are aiming to upskill their employees.
Yeah, really good question, and that's kind of the core value of this session, I guess, for me. So I've already alluded to quite a few of these, really. If you're not using an AI tool at the moment, don't be afraid. Have a go. If you are using it, refine what you're doing. Think about how you can leverage it further. Recognize what your knowledge base is, what your skill set is, what your experience is, and think to yourself, can I ask it to do something that I'm currently doing at the moment? And can I validate that the answer it gives me is correct? And if both of those responses are positive ones, go and have a go. The worst that can happen is you spend 20 minutes messing around with a large language model or Power Automate or another tool that helps with efficiency and improves, hopefully, the value of your time. Worst case is you might lose 20 minutes and then you might have to go and do the task yourself anyway. Best case is that, in my experience, most of the time is you get some value from that exercise that you can then translate over to speed up the task as it originally was anyway. So I would just encourage people to go and have a go, really work on your prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is going to be key. For the time to come, again, I've mentioned it, if you're in organisations, major projects that hold large data repositories, think about how you would analyse that data and how you would refine that data to be able to load it to an AI model, because that will be coming. For all organisations, that will be coming in the future. So a lot of the upfront work will be about loading the data into an AI model and then training the model. Again, if you've not been involved in AI model training, there are loads of websites that you can just go and volunteer for a bit, and just you'll get a flavour for it. I recently went to the States, and lucky enough to go to Boston, and in the Boston Science Museum there, Boston Dynamics have like a whole section in the Science Museum, and there's like, it's really cool. They've got like Spot the dog that walks around a little pre-built track and goes over obstacles, and then it'll go and self-charge when it gets a bit low on power and come back again. So it's really cool. But there's a section in the museum where you can just sit down at a computer station, and it will just bring up pictures, and then you can just press what the thing is. So it'll give like 7 or 8 options, and you're actually just training an AI model. So all that you're doing is the AI model will bring a picture up, and it will be something that it's struggling to differentiate. So it might be a picture of a bird, and there's like 6 different species of bird on there that it can't figure out which one it is. And you'll be like, oh, it's a sparrow, that. Press sparrow. And then all of a sudden it's like, it might then say, how could you distinguish? In some cases it will actually ask, how could you distinguish this as a sparrow? Oh, well, the beak's a bit smaller, and this is a bit, and that's and then all of a sudden it's like, next time it's like, okay, the beak's smaller, it's this, it's a sparrow. So just simple things like teaching it that. The way that AI is usually built is on neural network technology. Neural network technology is literally built off the back of our brains. So we have a neural network in our brain made up of synapses and nodes. The way that AI will navigate its own knowledge and experience is through a neural network. So it will know that, for example, if it needs to find an answer for something of a giraffe, it would navigate to the node which is animals, and then within that node it would navigate to another node which is mammals, and then within that node it would navigate to a node which is mammals with long necks, and then it would maybe find giraffe in there. So that's how our brains move around, and you know, AI will usually follow the same neural network logic path. So again, being comfortable with, it's a bit harder to do. I've used a simple example of an animal there, but with your organization's data, if you understand the relationships between the data, what type of data is it, where does it sit, who owns it, etc., then if you can build that as a neural network map, that again can help you train the algorithm so that you can get better information out of it. So there's a few things there really. Prompt engineering's one, playing with your data and making sure you've got it in the right format's another. Trying to build sort of neural network diagrams will help a little bit with the upfront loading of it. Being comfortable with training AI will help a little bit. Even with ChatGPT, for example, you can actually just load data into ChatGPT now. So have a go at loading it. Have a go at loading some data and then see if you can interrogate it. There are tons of people out there at the moment that are playing with it, and I know some of the software companies are getting a bit frustrated because lots of people are putting out there saying we've got this new AI technology that we've developed, and it's not actually anything new. It's just that they've got some data and they've slapped a ChatGPT front end onto it, and then all of a sudden it becomes a new AI tool. It's not really, it's just a data source. Yeah. But if you can learn to do that, that gets you one step in the right direction, right? Because then you understand how to load it, you understand how to train it, you understand the fundamentals of how it works. When we teach people risk modelling, for example, I always try to teach people from the basis of the fundamentals. A risk model operates off Monte Carlo analysis. What's Monte Carlo analysis? This is what Monte Carlo analysis is. If you understand the principles of how it works, it makes it much easier for you to be able to use it. It's the same with AI. If you understand the principles of how it works in the future, you'll understand how it behaves, and therefore you'll be ahead of the curve versus other people.
Yeah, no, absolutely love that. And I think you've mentioned as well, Matt, I'm the same. I tend to lean on GPT. God, if I could get it right, that'd be useful. Chat GPT instead of Google these days.
Yeah.
And just doing that just is using it in your personal life as well. It just really hones your prompt engineering skills. And I think we've said like prompt engineering sounds like quite a fancy schmancy word, but it is really just fine tuning your search.
Yeah.
And just understanding how the AI is going to interface with that.
And practice makes perfect, right?
Exactly.
So like you were saying, I think that use of it in personal life, it might seem counterintuitive or it might seem a bit daft, but actually, you know, a lot of the stuff I do with my kids, I'll be like, well, how, you know, if I'm on, you know, I've got my kids, the summer holidays are coming up. We're filming and recording this towards the sort of middle of July at the moment, and in the UK, and there's cool summer holidays are coming up, and I'm already on it, going like on 2 weeks on Wednesday when I've got the kids for the day. Can you make some recommendations of some really nice things to do for a 10-year-old girl, a 7-year-old girl based in the northwest of England, budget X, time frame including travel Y, you know, specifics. I'm giving it specifics, because otherwise I'll get, go to Saudi Arabia and go in the indoor ski slope. So I have to constrain it and be specific about what I want, but it'll give me a list of, oh well, actually I've had a look on the internet, and there's an art and craft session in Samlesbury Hall on this day, and that and the other, and it might come across as lazy. I'm not necessarily going to just do that. I'll still do the usual research that I would do anyway, and I'll still try and come up with an awesome day for my kids. But it gives me a head start, because I can immediately go, oh, there's a few things there that I didn't actually know were happening, and maybe that would be quite cool to have a go of. So it broadens your horizon. Yeah. It summarizes a much bigger data set than what you would possibly be able to collect on your own. And it helps me to improve my prompt engineering. So yeah, no brainer. Why wouldn't I use it in my personal life?
Exactly. Love that. Okay, cool. Let's wrap it up then. So I think I and everybody else already knows your answer, but for all the skeptics, all the advocates out there, AI in risk management, friend or foe?
100% friend. 100% friend.
Yeah.
But just remember to recognize the benefits of it, but also recognize the weaknesses of it. You know, there is a level of trust that we need to build with it, just like we you know, for those of you that are old enough, we had to do with sat navs and other technology in the past. So just recognizing where you can use it and where you can't use it. But overwhelmingly for me, it's done nothing but improve my ability as a risk professional. And I'm sure that other people will get the same out of it if they put the time and the attention into it.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. I think if you're an avid listener of the previous seasons, I think we sort of always wrap up the episodes in the same way. So just any piece of advice that you'd give to your younger self that you know now?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question, that, and I should be a bit more prepared for this, having done 2 seasons of it. But I guess for me, some of the things that I look back on and wish that I don't never regret anything, but wish that I could maybe have done a little bit differently, is being a little bit more confident in myself earlier on. I think a lot of my early roles, I spent a lot of time worrying about if I was good enough, if I understood it correctly, if I had the right information. And I think in hindsight, I should have been a little bit more confident that I did know stuff and I was prepared. And so I would just say to people, you know, trust in yourself, trust in your knowledge and your information. Obviously, if you're very new to things, recognize that and be humble and ask questions. And, you know, we always say to our team when they first start in a new role, if you ask a question in the first 6 months, you're going to get nothing but compassion and empathy from people, because everyone recognizes that you're learning. if you're in role for 2 or 3 years and you start asking some basic questions, people are going to start thinking, what's going on here? They should know this by now. So just use that opportunity to ask if you're new. If you're not so new, if you've got experience, be prepared to fight your corner. You know, if you believe that something's been done incorrectly, or you feel very strongly about something, be prepared to speak up. And at the end of the day, making that challenge offers the value for our clients. That's what we try and do at Optimise. So enabling our team, but also enabling risk professionals at large. You know, the profession comes under some scrutiny about how valuable is it, how useful is it. I think it's as useful as the people that are using it. So if you're a risk professional out there, just try and think about whatever you're doing, are you adding value? And if you're not communicating that effectively, communicate it effectively. And if you've got people pushing back on you and you feel a little bit bullied, just be prepared to have a conversation with them and move beyond it, and just have that confidence.
Love that. Great advice, and yeah, really rings true with me, and sort of backing yourself and standing in your corner and working with integrity and just trusting yourself and trusting those around you that they'll back you up as well. Fantastic. So I guess final piece, Matt. If anybody wants to get hold of you today regarding anything you've discussed, just to pick your brains, shameless plug, if they wanted to get in touch about any training in AI, if they're particularly interested in that, even any risk services, what's the best way to catch you?
So the best way to get hold of me is at my email address, which is matt.livingstone@optimise-risk.co.uk. Optimise have got a new module that we're putting people through at the moment called 21st Century Tools. That's all about trying to train and educate people in use of AI technology, automation, some of the more advanced features of some slightly more common tools these days, but things like Power BI and other things that will help with reporting. So the idea of the 21st Century Tools module is really to try and get people to leverage the benefits of technology beyond what has traditionally been used in risk management. So we'll be running 21st Century Tools courses in the coming weeks and months. So if you're interested in getting involved in one of those and attending one either in person or virtually, we'll have the options for both. Please get in contact with me. And equally, if you've got any questions on application of AI in risk management, just ping me an email, and I'd love to hear people's thoughts and comments on it. And I'm happy to offer help and support wherever I can.
Happy days. We'll put that email address in the podcast notes. But Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on. I've been Pat Bradshaw,
and I've been Nicola Boyle. Thanks,
guys.
Cheers, everyone. Take care.
And that's it for this week. If you enjoyed this episode of Riskologists, be sure to follow Optimise and Riskologists on all of our social media channels, where you can subscribe to the podcast and be notified of every episode so you don't miss a thing.
Please like, share, and leave reviews to help support us and increase our reach within the wider risk community.
And join us next time, where we'll be chatting with another leading figure in the world of risk.
Until then, thanks for listening and take it easy.